Alright, welcome back to the 55 Buick build, the POS build. Got the homeless looking clothes on, ready to get dirty in the garage, because if I wear decent clothes, they won't survive. Alrighty then. Last part of the brakes. We need back brakes. So, gotta make some lines. So, gotta run a line from the proportioning valve down along the frame to the rear axle. We have to put a brake hose on the rear axle, and we have to make lines to go from the hose to the wheel cylinders that we put in last time we were working on the brakes. So, the way I'm going to do it, the way I usually do it, is I'm going to start at the back of the car and work my way forward. So first thing I'm going to do is put a brake hose on here. So not a whole lot to what we're going to use here. Back on the 3/16 nickel 3/16 nickel copper line again. Some nuts, flaring kit. It's the Master Cool kit, which you don't have to have. You can use just a regular old flaring kit. And rear hose I chose is for a 1979 C10 pickup. That's usually my go-to hose because it's a little bit long. And I keep them in stock on the shelf, and I use them on pretty much every build that I need to use one on, which is everything, right? Right. 1/4 inch line in, 3/16 out, standard double flares, nothing special. All right, so first thing is going to be, I need a brake hose. This 8/8 rear has a bracket already mounted to it for the hose. And so the hose is going to sort of bolt to the top of the bracket like that. And I'm going to run up there to the frame. Hard to do with one hand and hold the phone. But I'm going to take this bracket out of here first and put a weld a bolt in here like a stud, because I can't get a bolt in through that. And I can't see what it had originally, so I'm going to remove this bracket first. Okay, here's the bracket removed from the axle. Up top, looks like it had a some kind of self-tapper or something in there to hold the hose from the Ford, which I don't know what size that was, because the hole I have is only so big. But a 5/16 bolt works good. So I'm going to put the 5/16 bolt through this, which threads in close, not quite. Still need a nut on it, but that'll mount on the rear axle like that. I can set the hose on there, clamp it down. Okay, so I just have the brake hose bolted on. I actually set it up facing the front of the car, and the other end here is going to go up to a cross member up there, and then the brake line can run along the frame and down to the front of the car. So I just needed an L bracket to get that up there, and I actually found this piece in my pile of stuff I removed from this car, and I'm going to modify it and mount it up there on that cross member, which is right above the rear axle there, and use that as my hose mount. Pretty simple. The only thing different about it is, if you notice, the hose end has little notches in it. Let's see if I can get that. The hose end is actually keyed. There'll be a spot there with a bump. There you can see the one, and one on the opposite side that's bigger. And that's so when the hose is in the bracket, it can't turn. Just keeps it locked in. So what I'll do is I usually drill the round hole in the bracket and then use a file to make some little recesses for those keys to fit into. You know, if you don't want to do that, you just drill a big hole and slap it in there. But I try to do it somewhat factory. So let me get this bracket modified. All right, there's the modified bracket. Unfortunately, it's really impossible for me to video under the car. I need to get a better camera in the first place, and maybe a stand so I can show this stuff, but basically this is going to mount right up there. Drilled 2 holes for this bracket to mount to that upper cross member, which is plenty beefy. That'll work. And I'm going to put it in with these self tappers, saved from a car. Could be saved from this car, I don't know. But I'll bolt it up, show you what it looks like. Okay, hose is mounted. Only real consideration when mounting a hose is make sure it can compress and doesn't hit anything. Suspension's at full droop right now, so it's going to compress up probably 3 inches to ride height, and then it needs another 3 for going up under bumps. So just make sure the hose can fold up and not bang into anything that's moving or cut itself on anything. And that is it. So on to the next thing, which is to make the 1/4 inch brake line. Is it? Yeah, we can do that next. No, actually I changed my mind. I'm going to run these, get the back finished here first. So I'm going to make brake lines for the rear axle. So we're going to run it from wheel cylinder here, down the front of the axle tube, over the U-bolt, this way, and up, and over to the hose. Only things to keep in mind here are, obviously, make sure when the suspension compresses that the brake line can't be hit by anything like the bump stop or something. And one thing you might not think about is, if you're going to run the brake line on the front of the axle, you should run it high with a gap, because if you strap this thing down on a trailer, like I've done probably 20 times so far with this car, the strap is going to wrap around the axle tube, and if your brake line is right here, it's going to destroy it. So I like to run the brake lines on the back side of the axle if possible, but there's so much going on here with the shocks and the panhard bar mounts and everything, there's really no room for the brake lines to be on the back, so they're going to be on the front. And again, very nice to work with the nickel copper. You can bend it all by hand, no big deal. All right, let's get the first one made. All right, first 3/16 brake line. I'm just going to start out with a 3-foot piece. And then we'll cut it down as needed. Somewhere like that looks good. Alright, get it cut. Get the brake line cutter, tubing cutter. So work it back and forth so you don't cut threads. Not as big a deal with this kind of line, but if you're cutting steel or stainless steel, it's easy to cut threads. It's a lot harder material. You don't want to cut threads. You just want to cut it in half. There she goes. All right. Clean up the end. All right. Now, first thing I'm going to do is put a nut on one end. Really don't have to worry about making this perfectly straight because it's not going to matter. I'm going to be bending it up anyway. Alright, nuts on there. My tool, this is going to be a double flare of 3/16. So I'm going to need to do this in 2 steps. We've got, our 3/16 tool, or 3/16 die, and our cone. Alright, so first thing, throw throw my 3/16 die in there for the first part of the double flare. My line in there. Okay. Crank down on that part in, which is this guy here. That little nipple's gonna fit into the tubing. Plenty of videos on YouTube how to use a master cool tool if you want a whole lot of detail, but it works really well. Just crunch that in there, hydraulic cylinder pressure, puts that up in there. That's the first part of the double flare. Take that tool out. Next tool is the cone. Put the cone in there. Spin that up. So it touches. Tighten the cylinder lock. Punch it in there. Like I said, if you didn't see my other video with the back or front brake lines, what I found when making double flares is when it comes to this step of using the cone, either with your handheld tool or an Eastwood tool or this tool or any other tool, don't crunch the cone in there as hard as you can. Leave it so you've started the double flare, but maybe not necessarily it's 100% done, because the fitting that you have will have that inverted cone as well, and you want to make this line fit that fitting perfectly, right? Well, what if your fitting's not exactly the same as this cone? Let the fitting make the final crunch on that double flare section there. That way you get a perfect line molded right to your fitting. There you go. Nice double flare. I have no idea if I'm putting that in front of the camera, but take my word for it. If you don't see it, that's a nice double flare. All right. So, now I'm going to move over to the car and start shaping this by hand, obviously, to what we need. Okay, so first brake line in progress. Just bent it by hand and got it over to the wheel cylinder there. Trimmed it down to fit. Doesn't have to be exact because you can bend this stuff and move it around. You can get a little extra length if you need it. Or if you have shortened it, just shorten it. But so all I did was I had done the double flare on the one end, so I attached that to the hose, ran it around, trimmed it off. Now I'll put that nut on that side. We'll see how it fits. It's in there. First one on the rear axle. Fits nice, no problems. High enough that I can see it from the back of the car, so I know when I'm putting a strap, go under the line. All I'm going to do is, in addition to this, is when I get the car turned around so it's closer to the welder, I'm just going to weld a little tab on the axle to hold the line solid to the rear, and that'll be good enough to keep it from moving around, vibration or anything. Lock it down. All right, time to do the other side. Gonna do it the same way. Double flare, attach the line to the hose, hand bend it over to that side, cut it, double flare it, done. Okay. Second brake line done. Nothing to it. This stuff's so easy to bend by hand. You can make it do whatever you need it to do. Alrighty. That's that. Now it's time to run the front brake line. Wow, don't bring the brake line from the rear hose up to the front. So it's going to go along the frame, down the frame, all the way up over here, and it'll follow along the line of the one we made last time and attach to the proportioning valve right there. So it's going to be bubble flare on this side, double flare on the other, and let's get it done. Okay. All right, so we're ready to do the long brake line from the front of the car to the rear of the car. I'm going to put a double flare on the rear end and find a nut that fits that hose. Which should be one of these. Nothing special about that brake hose. Let me just check. Yep. Okay, no problem there. Just a standard 1/4-inch tube nut will work. They give you a few different ones, different styles in the kit, which is great. All right, so now, straighten this out. 1/4-inch stuff is a little heavier to work with than the 3/16, but still, not a big deal. You want to use a straightener, you can use a straightener. I'm going to do it all by hand, because once the car is done, nobody is going to care if your brake line is perfectly straight. All they care is that it stops. So as long as the car stops, it's all good. All right. I'm going to cut the end off of this because I don't like the way that looks. To start, cut that off. All right. Clean up the end. All right, try not to knock everything over. The table is a mess because all tables must be full. That's the law of the universe. Any flat surface must not be exposed. Against the rules. All right, so now we're going 1/4-inch. So I'll grab the 1/4-inch die. 1/4-inch die is in there. There's a tube in there. Sanity check. Looks good. Down. All right. Now we got the 1/4-inch piece, tool to fit into there. Screw that in until it bottoms out. Crank down on the cylinder there and punch her home. Okay, loosen up that guy and screw it. All right, that's the first part of the double flare. Put the cone in. The second part. And we're just knocking everything over today. Compress it, don't kill it. Same way with the 3/16, just different size dies. Hope that looks good. Looks good to me. All right, now what I'm going to do that will not show up on video. I'm going to hand straighten this line because it's got to go back. Front of the car, the rear of the car. I'm going to feed it from the front of the car to the rear of the car. Get it all the way back to the hose. And then figure out where I need to trim it for the final bubble fitting up at the master cylinder. Alright, so let me make this into a long straight line and I'll be right back. Okay, here's where we are so far. Really couldn't video this because it's just time consuming. It's just bending and tweaking and figuring it out and yada yada. But at least this stuff, you know, you can really bend it any which way you want and bend it back. It's not a big deal. So we're running up here from our hose across the top of the frame, well out of the way of any exhaust if there was going to be exhaust over here. Down the inside of the frame rail, along the frame rail, step down a little bit so that we can jump down into this area and then go along the frame, step up to go over the cross member. I put a couple clamps on just to hold it in place. We're going to curve up and around over the top of the frame and come up into the engine compartment here and then follow along the same path as our line to the front brakes. So there's what I got left. I'm going to take a rough guesstimate and cut that and see what it looks like, and then I got to put the bubble flare on that end, and that's it. I'm not going to clamp it down 100% until I get the fuel lines in because they may usually run together. I might put a clamp up here on the frame just to hold it for now there as well, but usually I have the brake lines and fuel lines running next to each other, and sometimes I'll have a common clamp. So let me get that trimmed off and get that mounted. Alrighty, sitting in the engine compartment, and here's our 1/4-inch brake line just made. There's even a hole right there where I can use it to bolt a clamp down. That'll work fine. So the brake line's going to come up and around and connect to here. I'm just guesstimating and put a mark there. So I'll cut the pipe there, cut the brake line there, put the nut on, double flare it. No, I will not double flare it. I will put a bubble flare on it for the metric side and thread it in, and then, you know, massage it a little bit until it looks decent. It's a brake line. Just get it done, you know. I was gonna make it, you know, I was gonna get the measurements tools out and stuff, you know, if I was gonna enter this in the Riddler Award for 2023, which I seriously considered, but I didn't feel like getting it out, so we'll pass. So let's get that cut and flared. Okay. Yikes! Who's making all that noise? All right, let's cut this. Mini tubing cutter for the win. Some room here. Hope I cut it on the line. That'd be disappointing if I didn't, because the line may or may not be right anyway. Who cares? All right. That's that. Clean that. Okay. Get my nut out of here. You got the wrong wrench. Look at that. It's only hand threaded in. Uh-oh. Gonna have to clean out some rust, it looks like. That nut has got some junk in it. Get that cleaned up. All right. Okay, cleaned up the brake nut, drilled it out with a drill bit that may or may not be a 1/4 inch. Couldn't tell, but it was close. So now nut fits. Well, does it? Oh, would you come on? All right, well, that took a lot of work to get this nut on here. There were a lot of little dings in the line, so I was straightening this and straightening this and straightening this, and I got it down far enough where I believe I can get the bubble flare on. But it was a pain. I think this is a leftover coil. I don't think this was a new one. I'm not sure if it was something I had laying around. I think it was a kit that I already had used, part of it. All right, so let's see. Got the die in there for the, I think this is 6mm now I'm using on the 1/4 inch line for the bubble flare. So this is just a one-step procedure. Put the line in there till it bottoms out, which is good. I made it. Tighten down on that. Okay. Then we're going to get the 6mm die, which I left on the table. Okay. Got the ISO. No, I didn't. I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, now can we do this? Now I have the bubble flare die for 6mm to use on this 1/4 inch line. Okay. You know, sometimes things just don't go as planned. Okay. Take the tool off. Alright, there's our very nice bubble flare. Get the nut up here. Sure, get that back up there. Boy, that's tight. This thing was a real mother to get straightened out, let me tell you. Alright, in fact, I'm going to spray some lube on this thing. It's just, that stuff needs some lube too. Alright. Now, this can go up in here. And we got to give it a little bit of a bend over and up, like that. Okay. Now the problem with this nut being so tight, it's tough to turn, and I like to put these in by hand first to make sure don't screw the threads up. That'd just be another catastrophe. Let's see if this catches. I don't know. I don't like it. Don't like it. Alright, let me get this installed. Hooray. That one in there, no problem. Bend that down kind of the same angle as the fronts. It's got a little twisties to it. It's okay. Once the car is on the road, nobody's gonna care. All right. I'm calling it a win. It's connected. Well, it'll be a win when it doesn't leak. All right. Alrighty. All right, she's in there. The brake lines are done for the rear. Gee whiz. Okay. That's going to be it for today. I have other things to do now, and I need a break. So, next video, we'll be filling the system with fluid, seeing how bad I screwed up on any of these flares, and hopefully bleeding the system. I'll show you how I do a 4-corner bleed all by myself with no help from anybody, and it's not with a mighty vac. I've given up on those things. I tried those before and it never really worked for me. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.